The Jimmy Z Show.
All right, next up on the Jimmy Z Show, I'm very happy to have Scott Wilson of the Connecticut Citizens Defense League. Scott, welcome to the Jimmy Z Show.
Jimmy, thank you for having me on your show today.
You know, what we're talking about today is very important because Connecticut finds itself right on the front lines in the battle for the right to bear arms. Would you agree?
Absolutely, and it's been this way since December 14th of 2012.
Now, we just talked off the air. Your organization has been in existence for approximately 5 years, and 4 years before Sandy Hook. When Sandy Hook happened, and I don't want to we're not going to make this interview about Sandy Hook, but when that event tragically happened, your organization must have been able to predict that harder times for gun owners were coming in Connecticut.
Well, absolutely, Jimmy. And I recall sitting at we're a volunteer organization, so I have a day job, and I was sitting at my desk watching the events unfold, and I just knew as soon as they started putting out the counts of those that had deceased in the shooting.
Right.
I knew we were going to be in for the fight of our lives.
Yeah, and so it has been, because the legislature passed very aggressive gun laws, and the governor signed them. And so now the most egregious, if you ask me, is that the citizens of Connecticut have been told that they, as of last January 1st, they had to register their guns. And it's my understanding that many more people have not registered their guns than have registered them, and that many of those people who have not registered their guns are in fact Democrats.
Well, that stands to reason. There's a lot of gun owners from, whichever party, Republican or Democrats, in this state. And ironically, there are a number of pro-Second Amendment Democratic elected officials and pro-Second Amendment Republicans that are in office as well. Of course, there are certainly a lot more antis from both parties, but mainly the Democratic Party right now. The makeup is they're more anti-Second Amendment, if you will.
So, as the legislature was beginning their work to make gun laws much more aggressive, what was your organization up to during that time?
Well, around that time, there were a lot of people that were kind of spun on their heads, and there were a lot of people that owned guns that had not been paying any attention to gun laws or what was going on up at the Capitol, and that was one of the reasons our organization formed. Was we wanted to be some sort of beacon for people to really start being aware of their rights and trying to help advance our rights, and stop and thwart any anti-gun legislation. So immediately we were contacted by thousands of people with ideas, and some of them wanted us to do a lot more than is possible in the state of Connecticut at the time. We did what we could, and we were sort of a focal point for people to come to, and we had some rallies at the Capitol and lobby days up at the Capitol, and we started putting forth what we needed to do to prepare testimony for anti-gun bills in the legislature.
And now, of course, the law's in place, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit about the lawsuit that the organization is involved in, and where you expect that to go.
Well, we've already been through one hurdle right now. The case is filed as SHEW, SHEW, V, Malloy, as in Governor Malloy. And right now it is, we had filed at the Connecticut Federal District Court, and the judge in that case, Judge Covello, ruled that the law as it stands right now stands up to the Second Amendment challenge that we had applied for. So right now we are in the process, or our attorneys are in the process of drafting the litigation necessary for the appeal, and it would appear with some of the language that Covello put into his decision that we have a fairly good basis for our appeals, and we're prepared to not only appeal at the Second Circuit, but if we can receive cert to the Supreme Court, if need be, if we have to go that far, we're prepared to do that.
Now, do you believe personally that registering the requirement to register firearms goes against the constitutional Second Amendment?
Absolutely. Let's just, if the colonists thought that they had to register their firearms to give lists to the British back in colonial times, prior to the Revolution, I don't think they would have done so.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
If we look at the language, that the Second Amendment was based on, in Madison's notes, there's no way that something like this would have been acceptable to the founders and the framers.
And understanding that point, it would seem to me that if this makes it, or when this makes it to the Supreme Court, this decision would be one of the most important decisions concerning the Second Amendment in American history.
I believe so. And there are, aside from our challenge, there are a number of other challenges out there. New York, which we actually share the same team of attorneys against the New York SAFE Act as with our case. And then there's a case in Maryland as well that's going forth. So one of these cases probably should make it there. I think there are enough split decisions out there between us and New York, just with the language from the two judges in both our lawsuits, that it definitely quantifies a legitimate challenge.
Now, all of this litigation stuff is usually pretty expensive, and I know you have a donate button. I've got that link in my show notes, but I want you to explain. Now, one of the things that Bob told me in our email communications is that 100% of the money that's donated to the litigation effort goes to that litigation.
Anything collected right now via our PayPal, unless it's merchandise, which when you're clicking on a merchandise button, if you want to buy a hat or a shirt or something like that, is going towards our litigation. We've had numerous fundraisers throughout the state in the last year to raise the funds necessary to get us to where we are. Maybe a little bit beyond, but we could use more help, and from a national level, that would be tremendous, because I've been going around, and Bob's been going around hat in hand to our fellow Connecticut gun owners, and we've been hitting it pretty hard, and we keep going back to that well. So any support we get would be appreciated, and also it's great to know that when you spoke with Bob, he was on the job.
Yeah,
it's nice to not have to be the only one, pretty much really pleading for funds so we can continue this effort, because we must win this case.
Right, and that's why I got involved, because I was hearing the story, of course. At first, the pictures of people lining up to register their guns, and then recently the stories came out about many citizens in Connecticut not registering their guns. And then reading a story in the Daily Caller, I saw mention of your name and your organization, and I thought, this is something that people who care about the right to bear arms can get involved in, and they don't have to spend a lot of money. If a lot of people get involved, a lot of people send $5, $10, $20, it makes a huge difference.
It sure does, and it sure will. So, thank you for making that suggestion to your faithful listeners. I appreciate that, Jimmy. And one of the things that is absolutely ludicrous, aside from the registration component, the very fact that they're saying, they have the nerve to say that we're not banning your guns, you can still own your guns. But what they have done was by passing this and implementing it, is they have effectively banned these types of firearms for future generations of potential gun owners down the road. And there goes our heritage right there, right under our very noses, right out the window.
Yeah. Well, have they made it more difficult for, say, parents to leave guns to their children, or for one party to sell a gun to another party?
Well, as far if it's a banned firearm, you cannot transfer it to another party within the state of Connecticut. You can transfer it out of state. As far as leaving any gun that is on the banned list of firearms to your child. Yes, there is a method to doing this, which is essentially setting up a trust and passing it on that way. Short of what we were able to do prior to the law's passage was essentially, if it was a long arm that's on the list, here you go, son, or here you go, daughter. Here's Dad's firearm, and cherish it and clean it and keep it safe and secure and be responsible with it.
So there are banned firearms that you can still keep, but you can't do anything with once you're gone.
You can pass them on. You can set up a trust. You can. There is a method to pass them on, but it's requires a lot more legwork than it did prior to the law. There's no way to pass it on any other way other than transfer it out of state.
All right. Can you give me some examples of the firearms that they've banned with the recent legislation?
Sure. Every class of any AR-15 type pattern rifle or AK-47 type rifle, any semi-automatic firearm with any one feature, which would include the pistol grip, collapsible stock, flash hider, compensator, any firearm within that category, anything that has a threaded barrel, which makes it capable of accepting a suppressor of any type, has been banned too. Magazines, any magazine that receives over 10 rounds, so you're able to have a magazine with 10 rounds plus one in the chamber. Anything else, you're not allowed to purchase anymore. Transfer. You may keep what you have. You needed to declare those types of magazines prior to January 1st of this year, and you may actually even bring those magazines out in public with you, provided that they're loaded to no more than 10 rounds. That's a recipe for disaster, in my estimation, right there. You can fill the magazine to your heart's content within your own home or at a range where you're allowed to be and legally possess that firearm and shoot lawfully. You cannot carry two of those greater than 10-round magazines in public at the same time, even if they're both loaded to 10 rounds.
It also seems to me that it's not too hard to imagine that now that these firearms have been banned, that a more aggressive legislature and a more aggressive governor could call for the confiscation of some of those firearms.
I suppose that's possible. There's been a lot of talk about that. I'm going to, I guess, go on record and state that I guess it's possible, but I don't think that is a goal of theirs, at least right now. I think they're trying to, by their idea, stay within what's constitutionally lawful, and I think they don't want to be subject to a challenge by the takings clause.
Yeah, well, that's good. I don't ever like to sound like an extremist, but the kinds of things that have been happening over the past year or two with, of course, Obama in office in the White House and legislatures like here in California where I live, very aggressive legislatures taking every step they can, and it seems to me when they get away with something that they can't seem to wait to take it another step.
Well, right, and make no mistake, as far as there are seated legislators in the state of Connecticut right now that would, I won't say the governor. I'm sure maybe he might, but he has not said so publicly. Mm-hmm. But there are seated legislators that are on record saying that they would be happy to go around and confiscate these firearms and many more while they're at it. We had a bill proposed during the session last year when all this came up, the emergency certification, but one of the bills was for one-shot magazine or one-shot firearm, and that was proposed by Eddie One-Shot Meyer, and these are the types of extreme ends that we went through last year.
Yeah, well, they're out there. Let's see. The website once again is ccdl.us. It's the Connecticut Citizens Defense League. And there's a donate button there, and I've got the link for all of this in my show notes. And Scott Wilson, I really want to thank you for coming on the show.
Jimmy, thank you very much for having you on your show. I really appreciate it, and I thank your listeners in advance.
The Jimmy Z Show.